Hello everyone and welcome back to another edition of KerVAM, a Doctor Who podcast where we usually talk all about the Doctor Who DVDs and Blu-ray releases, the documentaries and everything about the physical media releases of Doctor Who. Now, we might do that a little bit today, but as has been our focus for the last 6 weeks or so, we've been discussing Doctor Who Flux. And of course, this week we've reached the finale, so it's a final of our weekly podcasts. And I'm sure there's going to be lots of interesting opinions to be shared about the Vanquishers, which I think, based on the social media response, has been quite a divisive episode. So I'm looking forward to getting stuck into exactly what it's all about. But quickly first, before I mention it, guys, please do check us out on Twitter at KerVAM Pod if you want to follow all the latest news about the podcast. And obviously, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, or if you're listening on YouTube, on the EMS Productions channel as well, we are there. So yeah, lots of ways to check us out. But I, of course, am joined by, as always, by my three guests. Ryan, how are you getting on today?
I'm doing very well, thank you. Trying my best to simultaneously remember and try to get what I've experienced with the Doctor Who finale, but I'm pretty sure we'll discuss more of that in length very soon.
Indeed, yes. I'm looking forward to it. Charlie, how are you? How are you feeling after the last episode?
I still don't really know my thoughts entirely. I can't decide whether I really love or hate this, but yeah, it should be an interesting discussion.
Okay, well, that's going to be good fun then. And Bill, how are you getting on today?
I'm getting on okay, yeah. And yeah, as I'm sure we will discuss later on, I have some, shall we say, mixed thoughts on this finale. Yeah.
Yeah, it's well, we might as well get straight into it. So obviously the Vanquishers, the final episode of Doctor Who Flux, the last kind of episode of a series we're probably going to get for the best part of 2 years at least. So quite a significant moment in many ways, wrapping up a shed load of stuff that's been thrown at us since the first episode. Well, let's go. Charlie, kick me off with some thoughts on the Vanquishers. I mean, we're going to cover lots of ground on go all over this episode for a while. So, yeah, give us a few initial thoughts on what was your take on the Vanquishers?
I feel like I obviously, like everyone else here, I had lots of reservations about this episode. Like, is Chibnall going to pull it off? You know, wrapping up all these loose ends. And I feel he did a good job at wrapping up the loose ends he did. And the other stuff was just literally just thrown to the side. Like, there were loads of random little plots that he couldn't even bother to wrap up, like that 2-minute scene on the Planet of Time with the Ravagers, where they just sort of get killed, and that's that. The Grand Serpent just being thrown onto this rock and forgotten about. He did nothing in the overall scheme of the series. But generally, it did have some really good things going for it. I really liked the concept of the Doctor being split across time. It kind of had to happen because there were so many plot lines that the Doctor wasn't in. It wouldn't really be about her at all. And I was a huge fan of the fact that they didn't do anything more really with the Timeless Child. And it was sort of acknowledged that it existed, but just sort of forgotten about at the very end of the episode. So, yeah, very mixed thoughts, but generally, yeah, would probably sit around the middle for me.
Okay. Well, Bill, why don't you hit us with a few thoughts as well there after Charlie's kicked us off?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with the positive stuff first, because obviously I'm sure we've got a lot of less than positive stuff to say later on.
Yeah.
So I'm going to just kind of mention some quite obscure stuff, but
go for it.
From my notes, yeah. So I liked the transition that we got from the previously trailer, how it sort of went from saying the previously captioned to the now captioned. That was really cool. I really liked the bit where the Sontaran commander mentions the Rutans.
Yes, I did love that reference.
Not you, Rutan. Yeah, that was nice. Lovely shots of the Sontarans marching about Liverpool with all the famous like Liverpool landmarks and everything. And I have one more kind of quick little positive obscure thing. It was a lovely reunion that we got between Jericho and Claire. I thought that was really well written, well handled. And also, I think that Jericho got a really great send-off and death in this episode. Really heroic end for his character. Now, I'm going to get onto some of the more negative stuff now. So I'm going to start off by saying I don't understand why Kate Stewart was there.
Just as any of us.
No, because for a start, you know, I know Kate is supposed to be the Brigadier's daughter and the head of unit and everything, but ultimately she is an old friend of the Doctor's in her own right. And so to basically pass up that opportunity to not really have a proper actual reunion with the Doctor, a nice little kind of few short little dialogues, little lines, of just a little catch up between the two of them. To not have any of that at all just felt so strange, because you would have thought that, I mean, it's not like it would have taken up more than a few more seconds of the episode's runtime to just have the Doctor go, oh, hello, Kate, you know, how have you been doing? Like, what you've been doing post-unit or whatever. And then Kate goes, you know, oh, how lovely it is to see you again, Doctor, like, and I see you've regenerated again, and, you know, stuff like that. It doesn't need to be like that much said. It could have just been a few seconds, and that was all that would need to have been said. I like Charlie, I don't really understand why the Grand Serpent was there either, because again, he didn't really do that much, and neither did Kate really. They were both kind of, I would say Kate was probably the worst out of the two, because at least the Grand Serpent got that pretty good interrogation scene, whereas Kate Stewart literally was just there, stood about, out of shot a lot of the time, and then just given a few lines of exposition, and that was basically it. But yeah, it was just a shame, because especially the Grand Serpent, because episodes 3 and 5 had kind of built him up to be quite a important character, quite a kind of like a really good solid villain, and then it just doesn't really go anywhere in the finale, and he's just kind of just there as a sort of ally to the Sontarans, and it's not really, you know, it doesn't get much development. We don't find out much about his past, other than I think him being some kind of ex-ruler or ex-dictator or something like that, which again I was really disappointed with. I think, you know, obviously we'll talk more about this as it goes on, but I think overall this finale was, I mean, I want to like say that, you know, although I may sound really negative, there were elements that I liked and enjoyed about this episode. And I think that it did a good enough job of trying to wrap as many things up as it possibly could. But I think it wrapped up some things better than others, because some stuff was given a proper ending, but a lot of stuff just wasn't. And that is where I just found it very disappointing in some ways.
Yeah, there is a lot of unfortunately negative things that can be said towards this episode. And well, Ryan, I'm coming to you. I can see, I'm sure you're ready to tear it apart. Take it away, and then we will all discuss.
Congratulations, Chris Chibnall. You played yourself 3 rubbish finales in a row. You did it again. Oh boy, where do we even begin with it? I have to say, looking at it, all these episodes back, I mean, obviously episodes 2 and 4 were for me, still the solid episodes, but I feel like episodes 1, 3, and definitely I found more so these last 2 episodes, it's really reminded me a lot of that recent Star Wars film, The Rise of Skywalker, where it's just a bunch of stuff happening all at once, just endless plot points, so much exposition, very little character, and them acting like as if it was their grand master plan all along. It kind of really reminded me a lot of, to some extent, of Trial of a Time Lord, where you spend all these weeks with this plot line, and at the end you just go, that's it. What was even the point of all of this then? I mean, Kate Lethbridge Stewart obviously was a pointless character. I think we all pretty much agree. It's like, what was even the point of bringing her back to begin with if you're not really going to do that? Anything interesting with her? The Grand Serpent, I feel like, is pointless, and that really annoyed me because I really like the actor Craig. Is it Craig Parkinson?
Yeah,
I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think he's an amazing actor. He's done a lot of great work. I mean, Line of Duty, obviously. He was so good in those first 3 seasons, and just to see him saddled with a character that has a cool power and is obviously plays the part well, but he just does absolutely nothing whatsoever, and that just really disappointed me because you bring in an actor as good as Craig Parkinson, and you expect to have he has such a you expect him to have such a really meaty part, but it's sounded with just doing nothing except being the Sontaran's lackey. It's so underwhelming. And Swarm and Azure, I think they're now the Tim Shaw of the series. I think they're basically, this series is Tim Shaw, basically. They're these blue-looking aliens with pointy stuff coming out of them. They're built up, they think of themselves as these godlike beings with these cool powers, and at the end, they just basically do nothing except stand and proclaim about how cool they are and get taken down in the most anticlimactic fashion. It's basically the same character, basically, and I'm just like, what was even the point of them being the main villains? If you're not really going to do anything with them, their plan made absolutely no sense. Because I'm sure I might have misread this, but it seems like their plan, I think, was to let the flux go on and then redo it again and again to mess with the Doctor. But then at the end, it seemed like, we're just going to sacrifice the Doctor to time anyway, instead of just keeping her around as our plaything. And it's just, what hope do they gain of releasing time? And I just never really got a sense of their plan, or why is it they're supposed to keep Diane around, and to getting all these survivors just to create like a psychic bridge to the Doctor when they could have just used other means. And we never really got a sense of how, in terms of them stopping the flux. And I'm pretty sure I know I'm pretty much beating a dead horse here with this complaint, but how much of the universe is left standing at the end of this?
We have no idea.
Yeah, they don't really explain it. Did it all get reversed, or is it most of it still destroyed? And if it is, that's a pretty bleak outcome. It just reminds me of that funny bit in that episode of SpongeBob where they stop something from happening and the city's in flames, and SpongeBob's like, "We did it, Patrick! We saved the city!" And I'm just like, I couldn't be reminded of a SpongeBob episode. And I'm just left with all this baffling. And I just feel like the whole Timeless Child thing with the fob watch and the teasing with the fob watch, and then bringing in that cameo of the fugitive Doctor in episode 3, and this whole talk of the division, I just feel like even that didn't really amount to much. It just feels like it just got it just feels like it keeps stretching and stretching, and I'm just like, at this point, I just really don't care about this plot line anymore, and I kind of wish it was just left altogether and we just move on to something else, because they kept stretching it out only to not really do anything with it. I just don't really care about. I mean, I didn't like this whole Timeless Child thing to begin with anyway, so obviously I was beyond help anyways, but because it kept stretching to this breaking point, and I'm just like, can we just file this under unclaimed baggage and just move on from here? And oh my God, I will say, it is nice that we have the Sontarans as a threat again. I'm happy that the Sontarans were being built up as like a big threat of the series. But even then, there were points where I just kind of felt like they weren't as good as they were utilized in episode 2. I mean, that bit with the Sontaran eating that chocolate. I mean, I was so close to turning off the TV at that moment. It drove me mad, and I'm just like, what was even the point? And in a way, I feel, I don't know. At the end of it, I just felt like saying, well, congratulations, Trial of a Time Lord. You just found your new best friend.
Yeah, well, indeed. It's I don't really know where we kind of go with this. Like, we might as well pick up some... Thank you for your opinions so far. It's very interesting to hear and contrast our different opinions. I feel, well, my kind of quick summary of it, just if people haven't watched my review of it, is essentially the episode does everything it has to do of wrapping up most of the plot, enough of the plot points for it to work, but it doesn't do it in a fun way or a way that's particularly satisfying to the audience. As we've said, there's been, shortcuts taken to resolutions. The Ravagers barely get any sort of, comeuppance. They just kind of turn up and look at the physical embodiment of time and realise, oh, they've messed up because the Doctor's sorted it out when they haven't even realised, and so that's it, they're done. But, it does mostly wrap things up. Like, every character mostly gets a conclusion, even if it's not a very good one or one we really care about. Sure, there are characters we've said, like Kate, like the Grand Serpent, that are a waste of time and literal waste of minutes of an episode. I was reading how ridiculous... you can look at episode 5, Survivors of the Flux, and just look at how much of the episode is pointless filler in retrospect. Like, most of the stuff with Dan, Yaz, and Jericho, ultimately all it needs is to get them to the Williamson tunnels. Like, the writing the message to Carvanista is completely pointless. He doesn't do anything about it and has no relevance to the plot in any way. And so that's pointless filler. All of those scenes are only to get them from wherever they are, whatever country, I can't remember where they start, to the Williamson tunnels. That's it. And even all the division stuff, like, we get all this stuff about the Timeless Child, about what the division is, and Tecteun stuff in episode 5, and then it's all completely dropped in the finale. The division gets about one mention, and that's it. Suddenly, it's not the focus at all. They sit there fob watch baiting, as I've seen the phrase I quite like, throughout the episode of, are we going to open it? Are we not? Are we going to find out her memories? Are we not? Is she going to choose to do it? Is she not? And it's like, I've realised that there is no good outcome to that storyline now. There's no outcome that will satisfy the audience, because either you give her all the memories, we see a 5-minute flashback sequence with probably the Ruth Doctor or Jodie playing like the Doctor of the past and a few scenes to create some sort of narrative of the Doctor's past, and then it takes away the mystery that's been created by having the Timeless Child and having all that lost past that we don't know about, which creates mystery around the character. So you've got that side of it. And fill in the TARDIS wiki page as well. Or the alternative is that we don't do it, and then it's kind of like, well, what was the point of it all along? You keep teasing the audience that you're going to, but then if we don't, it feels like we get no conclusion to the story or the arc. We had, the Timeless Children already did it, where you had the Ruth Doctor telling her, don't be defined by your past, and, focus on who you are now and the future and things. And clearly the Doctor's gone, no, I can't deal with that, between Timeless Children and Halloween Apocalypse, because suddenly she's on the search for somebody division related. But then she chooses not to open it when she could, because some moral ground or something that she feels like she shouldn't, or it's wrong to open it or something. I don't know.
Yeah, they're basically repeating that. It's basically a bit to repeat that little bit. It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly. And I'm like, I don't see how it can end in a satisfying way. We either get it all and then there's no mystery, or we don't get it and we're frustrated that we didn't get it. Doesn't seem to be a way where that really works now. So I think that's a real shame that we've ended up at that point. And it almost felt like in the episode we had a fob watch within a fob watch, because you had the fob watch, look, here it is, and then we saw a big house, and it's, look, all the memories are in there. They're in the fob watch, and then they're in the house inside the fob watch, and it's like teasing us. And then you choose not to give any conclusion to it. Sure, I think that it will carry over to the specials. I feel like we're all set up for a regeneration story, Doctor versus Master. The Master was the original person who set up this whole narrative, basically, in the beginning of Series 12, so it would make sense for the arc to come to its conclusion with the Master all over again. Maybe she gets the memories, maybe he steals them, I don't know. But I feel like that's where we're going to end in her regeneration episode, and then she'll regenerate for whatever reason.
Speaking of regeneration and the Master, I really did like that reference that the entity of time or whatever made. Basically the equivalent of your song is ending, like with the 10th Doctor. She did make reference to the Doctor being near a regeneration, and obviously did mention the Master, which I did quite like. It was kind of a throwback to obviously the your song is ending moment from the 10th Doctor special somewhere.
Well, I think I was trying to think about this from my review. I'm pretty sure it was the end. It was Planet of the Ood was when they originally dropped it in, and then you get the mysterious woman in Planet of the Dead going, "He will knock 4 times," and then the Ood turns up at the end of Waters of Mars and all that. I like that they had it in this episode, but it also just felt a bit of a rip off. I don't know. Maybe it just it felt a bit more than just a nice reference. It just felt a bit kind of not clunky, but then the Doctor going, "What do you mean? Obviously, she's talking about the Master. Like, come on, it's obvious."
Something just occurred to me. Instead of having Swarm, Azure, and the Grand Serpent, couldn't all 3 have just been replaced with the Master, and it wouldn't have made any difference? They could have just had the Master be partnering with the Sontarans and messing about with time to continue all this, and there was no need for these other 3 villains. You could have just had the Master, and it wouldn't have made any difference.
Yeah, I like. The Grand Serpent, I 100% agree. I like him as a villain, just he has no point in this story. Like, I hope that they put him on an asteroid, so they haven't killed him. So, probably there's not enough time for Chris to pick him up. But, I wouldn't mind seeing him picked up as a character in the future. I think he's interesting enough as a villain. Sure, he's kind of like a Master type figure, except he presumably can't regenerate. But I still quite like him, and I wouldn't mind seeing a story where he's the focus in the future. But he was pointless as part of this narrative, essentially. And as you say, he could be replaced by the Master. I feel like the Ravagers themselves, I like enough, and I like them as villains, and I feel like they do enough in this story to justify their existence. All the stuff from earlier in the series in the Temple of Atropos, and then going back in time and seeing that from the past, and the sort of, them getting locked up by the Division and escaping. Like, I feel like that adds enough interest into it, as much as their comeuppance is terrible. And I understand their final plan of their obsession with releasing time, the physical embodiment of time, which is a confusing concept. I like, there was this 3 or 4 minute long scene where Azure was talking to the Doctor and basically trying to explain their whole plan and situation, and I just felt like it was just full of sci-fi gobbledygook that I was really, even, I like Doctor Who and I like sci-fi, but even I was really struggling to comprehend exactly what she was trying to explain was the plan, because of course let's dump the exposition rather than show it happening. And it was just their plan was okay. And most of the series I enjoyed them as villains. I just feel like their ending didn't really work very well fundamentally, and I think that's a real shame. I don't know, where do we go next, guys? What other thoughts have you got? What other I feel like, I don't know, have we got any more to say about the Fob Watch situation? Bill, have you got any thoughts on the Fob Watch issue?
Well, this is where I have mixed feelings, really, is one of the key things. Is I'm glad in some ways they didn't give too much more away, but at the same time, if you're going to make the Division and Timeless Child such a massive part of the past 2 series as it has been, and to then you come to the end of this episode and it's basically just, we're not going to give anything new away, we're not even going to completely confirm that the fugitive Doctor is pre-Horn. We know pretty much that she is, but it would just be nice to kind of then have on-screen confirmation of that. But no, not even that. The only thing we really get to have anything to do with the Doctor's early life is the hint of Carvanista having not just worked with the Doctor before, but having basically, I think the impression was that he was actually a companion of hers in the distant past, because he talks about how she left him and everything. And that was interesting, but that on its own just isn't enough to satisfy, because I'm not saying I'm the biggest fan of the idea overall. I've spoken before about how I like it in some ways, but I don't want it to be given too much away. So yes, I like the fact that the Doctor decided not to open the Fob Watch in some ways, but then again, I think if that's the ending that we're going to go with, this is assuming that it doesn't get brought up in specials, which I'm sure it will do. But even if it didn't, then that's just a waste of time, really, because I think even people who have not liked the idea of it have still invested a lot in trying to understand it and everything. And to then just, for Chris Chibnall to then just turn around and say, I'm not going to reveal that much more about it. is just, it just feels disappointing, just not very satisfying. Also, I completely agree about how Azure and Swarm don't get a proper end to their like story at all. It just, again, it's one of many things in this episode I think that is just rushed, just so then they can get it into an hour. And I think you could have maybe had an extra 2 to 5 minutes, and you could have wrapped a lot of this stuff up better. I'm not sure if it would completely have paid off, but it would probably have been at least somewhat better, because you would have had more time to wrap it up. But then it's like, another thing I just want to highlight is Vinda and Diane, they get out of that passenger form way too easily. And it just feels like, when I think it was in the previous episodes that they made, it seems like a big deal, the fact that they were in the passenger form and trapped in there, and then to just get out in 2-3 minutes was just pointless, really. And also then when the TARDIS comes to rescue them, it gets through the passenger form without any real sense of danger. I don't know. It's like, this is the thing, is I want to like this finale, and I want to say Chris Chibnall has pulled it off. But unfortunately, for whatever reason, he just hasn't this time around, because I don't know. I think he's just, I certainly think the runtime just didn't help it at all, because if you want to wrap everything up properly, then, like I say, you need to give at least a few more minutes. Maybe, I mean, I know it would have been difficult given the global situation of them, but maybe even have an extra episode and have that be the finale, like, you know, make the finale a proper 2-parter in a sense. But as it stands, it's just, like, I like bits of it, don't get me wrong, and I would still say that this is definitely a good finale, and it does wrap some things up good enough, but others, and a lot of stuff, if I'm being honest, just isn't wrapped up at all, or is wrapped up really just disappointingly, and I just don't feel satisfied with a lot of it.
Well, I will say, sorry.
No, go for it.
In terms of these 3 Chibnall finales, I mean, I was thinking about it. I still think Battle of Ramscott, in my opinion, is still the worst Modern Who finale, because that is just an absolute nothing episode. But I was thinking about which is worse, this or the Timeless Children. I was actually thinking about this, although I haven't thinking about it. It's like saying, which is worse, banging my head on a wall or slamming my hand in the car door? Which is the less painful? I'm thinking about it. Even though I hate Timeless Children more, at least I got an emotion out of it. Like, I had more something to say about that episode, and it got emotion out of it. Whereas I feel like at the end of this, it just left me feeling a bit depressed, to be honest. And I shouldn't be feeling that way after watching a finale. You should be feeling some emotional reaction or satisfaction. But I just felt just fed up and depressed by the end of it, and I wish I wasn't that way. And in a way, summing up this whole series is exactly, I've got this statement here. It's in the way how I feel about this whole series, and it's the same way. It's the same quote that Chibnall is from the man himself, Chibnall, when he went on there to trash Trial of a Time Lord back in the 80s.
Indeed.
It could have been a lot better. It could have been much better written, especially the last story. Which in previous 2 seasons, frankly.
Well, yes, indeed. I struggle to decide where everything sits when I look at the Chibnall era. I'm sure we would probably all put Series 11 as the bottom of the 3. But whether I prefer Flux or Series 12, I'm not sure. Like, I feel like if Series 12 was structured like Doctor Who Flux and basically was just the arc episodes with a little bit extra, like if we just dropped Orm 55, Nikola Tesla episode, Praxius and Can You Hear Me, and just had the other like 5 or 6 Archie episodes, then I feel like that'd be a pretty decent series, because I don't dislike The Timeless Children as much as Ryan, certainly. I think it's a more reasonable finale, and I'd probably put it above The Vanquishers. And, you know, if you have Spyfall running into Fugitive and then the Cybermen 3-parter to finish it, I think that's a pretty solid series. But whether it actually sits above Flux with everything else thrown in, I don't know. I think the Flux is definitely let down by its finale now. We have to say that. I think we've said it since before the season started, that the finale might well define it as a series. And I think that's proven it. And I think people will remember it more negatively because of the finale, unfortunately, which is a real shame.
Yes, see, I do agree. Series 11, I do think it's the worst. I do think Series 12 is slightly better because of, I mean, even though I don't like The Timeless Children, and even though both Orphan 55 and Praxis, I could just take or leave them. All the other episodes I have really enjoyed. And also, I will say, I think Series 7 is better than this because, yes, that series was a messy season with basically 2 seasons crammed into one, basically. That's basically what Series 7 was. But I would much rather watch Matt Smith with the pods. I'd rather watch that first half again, from Asylum of the Daleks to the Snowmen. I'd watch Hyde again, and I'd watch Name of the Doctor again, that had more good episodes than I'd say bad. Whereas I feel like with this series, it's only been War of the Sontarans and Village of the Angels that I've liked, and all the others, either I was kind of or just really frustrated and depressed by.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me then Series 11 and 12 are probably aligned because, like you, Elliot, I don't mind Timeless Children as much. Like, I'm not a huge fan of it and what it means for the Doctor. But I thought the episode itself, and especially Ascension of the Cybermen, was actually pretty good if you look at it without the reveal. I think it's all right. Yeah. But Flux, I think, yeah, I will see it as a bit more negative because of the 2-part finale, really. Although, if we're looking at it from like a sum of its parts, like just looking at each individual chapter, then I do generally probably prefer it to Series 11 and 12, just because parts 1, 2, to an extent 3 and 5, and definitely 4, I think really do bump it up there for me. And I say my least favourite of the bunch probably has to be the 6th one.
Yeah.
But I think it would have been much better if it was less about Swarm as your Grand Serpent, Vinda, Bell, Diane, all of these pointless side plots, and literally just cut down to the Doctor and the Division, and maybe even have the Master and the Ruth Doctor play a larger role. I think that would have been much, much better.
Yeah. What about you, Bill? Where does this series sit for you in the 3 of the Chibnall era?
Series 11 for me is still the worst of the Chibnall era.
Yeah.
I mean, there are some episodes that I do like Rosa and Resolution, everything, but Series 11 on the whole just is the worst, I think, of the 3. And then as for between Series 12 and Flux, see, I've liked Doctor Who going back to serialized format with Doctor Who Flux, but ultimately I think I'm going to have to just about choose Series 12 over it, because Series 12, I can name a lot more episodes from that series just on a few fingers that I really, really enjoyed, and would be happy if I was stuck on, let's say, like a desert island with just those episodes, I would happily rewatch them for the rest of my life, Whereas with Doctor Who Flux, it's like, Village of the Angels, War of the Sontarans, really good. Once Upon a Time, that's pretty good, I think, for most part, but it is confusing, and I get why, people don't like it as much as Village and War. And then Halloween Apocalypse is fine.
Yeah. And
The Vanquishers, I think, I would say it's a little bit better than Halloween Apocalypse in some ways, but then it's also worse in others. So it's, I would probably take Series 12 over Series 13, because at least with Series 12, I've got episodes like Spyfall, Fugitive of the Jadoon. I've got also The Haunting of Villa Diodati and Nikola Tesla. And Essential Cybermen and Timeless Children, with all its problems, is, I agree, probably a better finale than The Vanquishers, because at least, it's the only really kind of negative stuff I have to say about that finale would be the reveal. And like I've said before, I'm not the biggest hater of it, but I'm not the biggest fan of it either. It's, I'm kind of have mixed feelings about the idea of it. But if that's the only negative thing I have to say about a finale, then I would say that is a pretty good thing overall. It is a shame, because honestly, I really want to love Series 13, especially because it's serialized. And I honestly, if Russell T Davies, when he comes back, wants to carry on with a serialized format, even despite, Doctor Who Flux not living up to expectations in many ways, I would still be happy for him to continue with it, because I think Doctor Who Flux has still proven that it can still work ultimately. I just think you probably need at least 8 episodes rather than 6, and you need to focus a lot more on what the overall arc of the series is going to be, rather than kind of focusing on it in some episodes and then more or less having standalones in others, which is what we got with Doctor Who Flux. It's the Chris Chibnall era is, again, overall I want to like it, but there are problems I have with it.
Okay, so I also wanted to talk about, probably the titular Flux in Doctor Who Flux, and how that was all kind of resolved or not resolved, or exactly where we sit when it comes to that. I don't quite know. It's probably the answer here. We saw obviously the Centaurans' whole cheeky plan of trying to kill all the Daleks and the Cybermen, which obviously backfired on them. So we had triple genocide, as I saw people putting, or quadruple if you include the Lipari as well, which is also a bit questionable of the Doctor. I know the Doctor's experienced lots of genocides before, but it was still, an interesting moment. And then the Flux gets sucked away into Passenger, which also, again, it makes sense. We've had Passenger there for a while. They've introduced the concept and then used it to defeat it. Sure, makes sense. I feel like there was also another device box that was bigger on the inside that they could have also absorbed the Flux with, to a more dramatic and emotional effect. But there we go. And then we don't, as we've said, we don't really know where we're at. Like, is the universe just mostly destroyed? I guess we don't go, in Doctor Who, we don't leave Earth enough to really notice whether the universe is destroyed or not, quite frankly. It's certainly not in the Trish Chibnall era. And so I'm just left wondering and left undecided as to whether this is actually a satisfying way to wrap up the fundamental story of the series that's in the title. Like, it's just weird that this series almost feels like it became more about the Division and the Timeless Child in the middle of it, and then suddenly they were like, oh wait, this is called Doctor Who Flux, we better come back and talk about that Flux thing in the finale. That not quite forgot about, but certainly wasn't the main focus in episode 5. It was all about, Tecteun and the Division. And so, I don't know. Charlie, what did you think of all the Flux stuff and how they ultimately have, I think, resolved the Flux situation?
Well, like you said, using Passenger does make sense. It's not like it was just plucked out of nowhere. It was sort of established who Passenger was and what it could do. But I like you said, obviously hinting to the TARDIS, it would have been much cooler if they'd used the TARDIS to absorb the Flux. And like you were saying about how much of the universe is left, that doesn't seem to be resolved. It's not like it's been reversed or there's a new universe or anything. Most of the universe has still been destroyed. It was hinted in Survivors of the Flux that there are only like a few galaxies left. Like, what's the effect of this? Is Skaro gone? What's gone? What's the effect of this? There's still, although lots of the Daleks and the Cybermen and the Sontarans are dead, and the Lupari, there's still got to be loads of other displaced beings. It's just sort of not been resolved very well, I think. Like, the way it was handled, like the actual defeating of the Flux, I think did work to some extent, but just the effects of the flux weren't explained at all, and I wish they'd spent more time actually talking about the flux, like you said, rather than the Grand Serpent, Swarm and Azure, everything else. So yeah, it wasn't the best.
Oh. Well, funny enough, something just occurred to me. I think there's a bit more of a bigger death count because Azure was kind of stealing all those refugees from all these other planets and takes out to murder all of them to generate this. I think this psychic link to the Doctor, that division too, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But there's an even bigger body count, and I'm just like, is there even barely like a few 10 planets left at this stage? And if the Daleks end up all getting destroyed, how come that there's still plenty running around in the New Year's Day special?
Well,
it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I'm a little bit at a loss as exactly where we are with the universe. I did watch it again. I listened really carefully to all the dialogue to try and figure out if they explained whether the universe was fixed or not. And I know there was all the stuff with Swarm and Azure saying about how they were going to kind of almost like map. I think the impression was like map the flux onto the Doctor so she feels the physical effects of all the people dying, and then redo it over and over and over again. I think that was fundamentally part of their plan. And then the other part of their plan was to use the final flux event, because we need a second one apparently, which would ultimately destroy the Temple of Atropos and the Mori, and therefore release the being of time that was being trapped by the Mori. And it just doesn't give us any impression of whether it's all been resolved or not. Like, sure, Atropos is still sort of there, and the Earth is there, but all it needed was one shot of a CGI shot of the universe, either destroyed or not, and one line of dialogue from the Doctor going, well, the universe is still a pretty bad place out there, or, well, the universe is all back to normal thanks to this technobabble. That's all it needed. Like, we've talked about this quite a bit in the podcast about just how much of a rush everything feels and how fast-paced it was and how everything... I just don't understand why they couldn't have got another 5 or 10 minutes of runtime on this episode. Like, I think Timeless Children was 65 minutes. I'm pretty sure Revolution of the Daleks was like 75 minutes or something, wasn't it? It was really long. I'm like, why did we try and cram this all into 59 minutes? Surely they could have negotiated with the BBC for 5 or 10 more minutes of runtime here. And I think it could have just so benefited, because... even just like some of the weird I don't know if you guys noticed the weird cutting in this episode at points that really felt like they were almost trying to save time with the cuts. There was like classic Star Wars wipes I noticed in it as well, from the old George Lucas wipes in Star Wars. Like, that was between every little sort of scene as well. It just felt like they were desperate to save time constantly, when surely they could have just asked for 5 or 10 more minutes. I don't know. That's just my perspective on it.
The frenetic editing was another thing that reminded me a lot of Rise of Skywalker, because I remember there was a lot of frenetic editing in that film to get from scene to scene to scene. It was exactly the same here. And also, quickly mention on the flux and how they don't address it all. It's also reminded me of that bit in The Simpsons where Homer's just said, I'm confused. Is this meant to be a happy ending or a sad ending? And Marge is just like, it's an ending. That's enough. That's how it is with the full flux scenario. It's just like, okay, just leave it and move on.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh boy.
Yeah, I mean, I think the flux, we just don't know. I guess I'll have to wait and see what Chibs decides to do with it in the next 3 episodes, because presumably we're going to get some impression of the universe in the next 3 episodes. And maybe it's a plot point that will kind of be picked up on, the fact there isn't much universe left, and then maybe RTD will do something with it. Maybe he'll just forget about it. Like, the thing is, RTD seems to like the Chibnall era, at least on social media. He likes the Chibnall era. So I don't think he's just going to retcon his stuff. He's not going to come in and say the time of child was all a lie, or, the flux never happened. And I don't think he's going to go down that route. But I also think it's much more likely he will just kind of ignore all these things rather than actually really, run with them and do anything further with them. So I don't know where that leaves us for the universe. I guess we'll have to just keep waiting and seeing. I mean, we had obviously the Centaurans' fundamental plan. Did we all kind of like what the Centaurans were trying to do, to try and become the ultimate race by tricking the Daleks and Cybermen into getting themselves killed? I mean, it showed a bit more, I guess, strength from the Centaurans than when they just got destroyed by Carvanista flying a ship into them in episode 2. And I like the fact that they now have a force field. I felt like that was a direct, after they all got wiped out by having a ship flown into them, they were like, we better think about this and put a force field around it, so they can't do that next time. So I thought that was just a little, a nice nod to, we realised our mistakes and we sorted it out. But I don't know, What, Bill? What did you think of the sort of Centauran kind of plan and plot that fell into this episode?
I thought it was okay. I think it was one of the better elements of this episode, because it was. I want to say it's almost kind of cheesy in a way, but it made sense why they were wanting to be essentially like the masters of the universe and want to control what was left of it. And it makes perfect sense to go after the Daleks and Cybermen, especially, you know, being the two biggest monsters arguably in the whole of Doctor Who's history. It was nice to see all three of them interacting, because I don't think we often get that very much. I think we did get it kind of back in the day with David Tennant's and Matt Smith's eras, but not as much nowadays. Like classic monsters interacting with each other and everything. So it was nice to see that. And yeah, it made sense, which is a good thing. But yeah, I mean, that Centauran as well. I know, like Ryan said it earlier, but that Centauran wanting chocolate was interesting, to say the least. It's almost like the way he says chocolate at the end. I don't know if anyone here has ever seen Friday Night Dinner, but it almost reminded me of Jim from Friday Night Dinner.
Yeah,
like the way he says it, it just sounded a lot like him, and I don't know. It was, yeah, that was strange, but the plan overall was fine. Like, it made sense, and it was a good enough plan, because you know, obviously they're going to want to look after themselves ultimately. So yeah, makes sense. And yeah, it also makes sense for them to go after the Daleks and Cybermen, especially.
Yeah.
And yeah, it was nice to have the Centaurans back again. It wasn't as greatly utilized as they were in War of the Centaurans, but it was nice to have them again nonetheless. And yeah, I think they were definitely one of the better elements of this finale.
Yeah, exactly. I tend to agree with that. Yeah.
If you love or hate the Centaurans in this episode, I feel this is honestly the most coherent and well-paced plot line of this entire episode. I feel, although it's not maybe the most exciting, it makes sense. It has a start, it has a conclusion. There's not really many plot holes regarding them. It sort of does make sense, but it's kind of ignored when there's about 12 other plot lines going on at the same time.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guarantee that Sontaran chocolate scene, that's going to spawn 1,000 internet memes from this point forward. I guarantee there's going to be so many internet memes out there. It's going to be like, oh no, look at what you caused.
So what's worse, the Centauran chocolate scene or the Wi-Fi scene from Resolution?
Oh my god!
Oh, no.
I still can't believe that got through. Several producers sat down, watched that scene, and thought, "Yeah, that's what we need on New Year's Day in Doctor Who. Definitely, it's great fun." I'm just, I
don't know. That's a real tricky. Again, that's like saying, do I bang my head on a wall or do I slam my head on a car door? Which is going to be the most painful or the least painful? I mean, I'm sure listeners out there, if you pick which one's which, then that's your canon.
Well, indeed, exactly.
That's a real tough question. I'm going to have to come back to you on that one.
Have a good think about it. Well, I might as well come on to one of the things that I think worked a little bit better in this story, this episode, which was the scenes right towards the end of the episode with the Doctor and Yaz. I felt it was one of the few emotional moments that actually kind of hit in this series in the Chibnall era, I think, frankly. Just seeing the sort of moment between the Doctor and Yaz where the Doctor kind of has been sort of thinking about this for a while, but finally kind of, you know, had the opportunity to kind of acknowledge the fact that she's been a bit of a douche towards Yaz for, well, frankly, since the beginning of Series 12, and in not telling her things and, you know, being distant and being really difficult. And so I thought it was just really nice that we kind of got that moment between them, a bit more emotion between them, a bit more connection between them. I mean, Charlie, did you like how that scene played out? Do you think that that's kind of, we're reaching a bit more development of a Doctor-companion relationship that we haven't seen since Series 10, 9, something like that?
Yeah, it was nice to see the Doctor interacting with Yaz. I do think it's a bit late because the Doctor, the 13th Doctor now has 3 episodes left.
Well, yes.
One of which will probably be spent mostly with the Master, really. And I don't know. I feel it's also slightly strange. The Doctor still has no interaction with Dan, pretty much.
That's true. Yeah,
Like
literally none.
There was the end. I am quite happy that Dan is still on board because I do
Yeah.
really like him as a character. He's a really fun character, nice comic relief, but still an actual character. And I did like, they haven't just sort of abandoned him at the end of Flux. They've sort of kept him on for a bit. But yeah, I did quite like how the execution of the scene played out. But at the same time, I feel that could have been done in Halloween Apocalypse.
Yeah, it's true. It was a good scene, but as you say, whether they maybe should have done it earlier, I think might have been of benefit really to it. And well, as you say, Dan, I don't mind Dan as a character. He just doesn't really have a lot of character. I mean, I think it's utterly hilarious before the series, when he wasn't allowed to say anything about it, he went on to BBC Breakfast and said, "I'm Dan Lewis, I'm a plasterer from Liverpool." And not once is it referenced on screen that he is a plasterer. Doesn't mention it a single time in the whole 6 episodes. I thought that was that's the only thing he's allowed to say, and yet it's not even referenced. There you go. That's Chris Chibnall secrecy for you. And I just hope that they get a bit more of a build up, a bit more of a connection in the specials, because I would be a bit sad if Dan were to die in the next episode, but I don't feel like I care enough yet because they just haven't established him as part of the TARDIS team and part of a character that I should really care about that much. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that are they going to be doing a whole Yaz has to sacrifice herself to save the Doctor, or the Doctor sacrifices herself to save Yaz because they're falling in love in the last episode, blah, 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 blah. Maybe they'll do something like that. I mean, I saw Mandip the other day saying, "Oh, well, I'd love for Yaz to stay on with Russell T Davies." I'm like, there's no chance that Russell is going to want to take on Yaz. I'm sorry, but has Mandip's got to be lying, because clearly there's going to be a conclusion to her story in the Centenary Special that's already been shot. So she's got to just be pretending she doesn't know how it ends, because she clearly does. And there is no chance she is staying on for the RTD era. As much as I don't dislike her as a companion, just Russell will obviously want a clean slate to go into the new era. So yeah, I guess they have to keep trying, but no, I don't know.
I feel like that moment with Yaz and the Doctor at the end, I will agree, it was a nice moment, but at this point, it's they spent so much of this season apart that I just don't really feel like that scene was really earned, because I feel like that's a scene that should come from a Doctor-companion relationship that had a lot more time together and more. But it's because they spent so much time apart, it just felt really hollow. And as you said, Dan just kind of feels like you introduce him, but he spent so much time apart from the Doctor that it was just absolutely baffling. And already, I know we're only about roughly nearly a year from her final episode, and I can already predict what my reaction's going to be, regardless if it's good or bad. I just know what my reaction's going to be, and I'm really torn about whether or not I should say it now.
Go for it. Do it. Just do it.
Are you sure?
Yeah, do it. Tell us, what are you predicting when we do a podcast in October of next year or whenever it is to discuss whatever the Centenary Special is and her last episode? We're going to hold you to this. What is your reaction going to be?
Regardless if it's good or bad, I'm not going to love it. Okay. That is the fact. I'm not going to love it because it's going to be the culmination of the entire Chibnall-Whittaker era. And it's an era that I've never felt any emotional attachment to for all the problems we've already stated. I was never invested with this Doctor. I never cared for any of all of these companions. I never really bought the relationship the Doctor had with these companions. I never was shocked and amazed by the reveal of the Doctor being the timeless child. I felt the opposite. I felt I felt mad. I felt mad at myself for being mad. I've never been on board with Flux. I mean, it kind of confirmed that Quest storylines in Doctor Who never really truly map out, and sadly, Key to Time is still the best one we have. Well, I was never invested in Flux. It was so fluxing insane at the end of it all. And so, because of all this, I am not going to feel the sense of triumph when she finally defeats the Master. I'm not going to feel the sadness when she's saying goodbye to all of her companions. I'm not going to feel the heartbreak when she regenerates into the next Doctor. I'm not going to feel any of that because of how very uneven and sloppy the whole build-up has been from all these other episodes. And so, I was never going to get attached to Chibnall's vision of Doctor Who because it's not for me. It was never going to be for me. And so it's because of all this, regardless if it's going to be good or bad, I'm not going to end up loving her last episode. I just know it.
Yeah.
It's I feel I kind of feel the same, although I do feel somewhat more positive about this era and the timeless child concept, the new Ryan. It's I do look forward to the next episode. Like, it's more Doctor Who. It could be really good. It has been for a couple of episodes this season, but I've not been as invested as I was in the last season of the Capaldi era, which is probably my most favorite season of New Who. I think it's really fantastic. And as of Twice Upon a Time, I was only a Doctor Who fan for 8, 9, 10 months. And I was probably more sad at that episode than I will be at the Centenary special, at which point I will have been a fan for about 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, exactly. With Capaldi's last 3 episodes, that end trilogy of World Enough and Time, The Doctor Falls, and Twice Upon a Time, I was emotionally invested all the way through. I mean, I legit teared up and cried at the end in the last 20 minutes of Twice Upon a Time, which is, I think, the most I've ever felt emotional at a Doctor's leaving, which is probably the reason why those last 3 is, in my opinion, the best farewell for a Doctor. Yeah, I know I'm not going to feel the same reaction with Whittaker because of how just uneventful and just how very little I've been invested in her era up until that point.
Yeah, it's very true. It's again, I'm probably more in Charlie's camp of not like, I go into every episode hoping it's going to be great. I never, even though I know it's written by Chris Chibnall and therefore I know it probably will have all the same problems that a Chris Chibnall episode of Doctor Who has, I still always hope it will be good. And I'm not going to feel the same emotional connection when Jodie leaves as I did with Peter Capaldi because he was my favourite Doctor. But I'm also hopeful that it will at least be a sort of satisfying send-off, a good story, and that she will, have her sort of triumphant moment to finish that off. And I was just thinking, it's kind of off to a tangent, but I was just thinking about how when Russell T Davies does his first episode, whenever this may be, probably in late 2023, it will be the first episode not written by Chris Chibnall since The Haunting of Villa Diodati in 2020, because he has written Ascension of the Cybermen, Timeless Children, Revolution of the Daleks, the whole of this series, and all 3 specials. So over basically a 3-year period, he's written every single episode of Doctor Who. So it's kind of almost like no wonder if you don't like his style of writing, then that's kind of going to encapsulate a lot of his era, because he's written most of it. Like, he wrote half of Series 11, he wrote half of Series 12, the whole of Series 13, all of the specials. Like, I know Russell did quite a few in a row with the end of sort of his era with but then he wrote them, they were co-writes, weren't they? I think Planet of Dead was with Phil Ford, or was that Waters of Mars? I can't remember. But there was a couple of co-writes in there, whereas obviously I know he did Maxine Alderson, he did Village of the Angels, but apart from that, it's all Chris for 3 years, and it's like, I think it must be unprecedented in Doctor Who for about 10 or 12 consecutive episodes to be written by the same singular person. I don't think it's necessarily a good thing for the show. I know it was kind of required because of the situation of this series and COVID and all that, but I'm not sure if that's really a good thing. And I look forward to when we get to ultimately Series 14, whenever it comes around, to seeing a more varied set of writers having their stab at the show. Well, I think that we've fairly thoroughly tackled the Vanquishers, and ultimately is saying it's a pretty disappointing finale. It's a bit of a shame. Kind of lets Flux down a bit, and we have mixed feelings for the last 3 episodes of the Jodie Whittaker era. We might as well, seeing as we saw a little trailer of it, we might as well have a brief mention of Eve of the Daleks, which is the New Year's Day special that was teased at the end of, or in the next time trailer, and a TV trailer as well. Bill, what do you think of the third consecutive New Year's Day special with Daleks in, if we don't include Spyfall, which was on New Year's Day but wasn't a special? What do you think? What are you expecting from Eve of the Daleks?
Yeah, so I must say, I mean, I'm definitely looking forward to Eve of the Daleks an awful lot, because I've seen the original Next Time trailer that aired at the end of The Vanquishers, and then I've also seen the extended trailer that was available on, or still is available on YouTube. Mm-hmm. And the extended trailer especially really got me hyped for it, because, it's Doctor Who does Groundhog Day, essentially, and I like Groundhog Day as a film. So for Doctor Who to do an episode like that makes complete sense, with a time loop and everything. Mm-hmm. Whether or not it will live up to our expectations remains to be seen, but at least we don't have to wait a very long time not to find out, because we've only got a few more weeks until
indeed
New Year's Day. Yeah. So I'm looking forward to it, because if nothing else, it will be, I think it's definitely going to be a episode which has a much shorter amount of cast members in. I think it's only got, if you include like Nicholas Briggs and then all the Dalek operators and everything, it's probably only got like 10 cast members, I think, or so.
Yeah.
But I think that's probably something that the Chris Chibnall era needs at this point, because I don't know what it is with Chris Chibnall and writing in so many characters in episodes and everything, but it's become almost like a cliche of his era at this point. With we've had it in Resolution, we had it again in Spyfall, and then we had it in the series 12 finale, and then we of course had it in the Vanquishers as well. So to then have a much more reduced amount of cast, I think will hopefully anyway will play to either the Daleks' strengths, because hopefully then that can then give Chris Chibnall, time to flesh out, like for instance, the Doctor and Dan's relationship with each other, and maybe even the Doctor and Yaz's relationship with each other, and just be a good amount of fun for a festive special. I really think that's going to be the case. Whether it will be, we'll have to wait a few weeks to find out, but I'm fairly optimistic at this point, but we'll see.
Yeah, Ryan, what about you? Is Eve the Dalek something that excites you at all?
The thing that's having me is interested is two things. One is that this whole time loop concept involved in it, and it's so funny with that, because I'm in the midst of playing Deathloop on my PS5, and which is, I think, it's a good game, and that of course deals with time loops and those kind of concepts. So I'm very curious to see how they're going to introduce that in a Dalek story, and I think that's going to be a lot of fun. And the second thing I'm looking forward to is the fact that it has Aisling. I think her name is Aisling B. And I think she's super hilarious. I think she's a really talented actress and comedian, and so I'm looking forward to seeing what sort of role she has in the story. But I will say, if she gets wasted in the same vein as we had with some of these other actors like Alan Cumming, Laura Fraser, and especially Greg Parkinson, I'm going to get really annoyed if they waste Aisling B. But I'm hoping that's not the case, because I really want her to have a great part, because I think she's so talented, and I really want her to have a great part. I'm just hoping they don't waste her, do her dirty like they did Craig Parkinson. Poor Craig.
Well, indeed, yes. And Charlie, finish us off. Are you excited for Eve of the Daleks?
I am. I think it'll be, after all of Flux, whether some episodes were good, I feel it'll just be nice to sort of escape from, the craziness that was Flux. We'll have maybe like 8, 9, 10 cast members instead of 60 or something. I don't know. We'll have a lot less, and it'll be a lot better. And like I said, it is like a Groundhog Day with Daleks, and it'll be really fun. I think just a nice relaxed episode. Well, not relaxed because it has Daleks, but it'll be somewhat more easy to watch than Flux.
Yeah, a more normal episode of Doctor Who, maybe, which, maybe we didn't want it at the start of the series. You thought, serialised series is going to be great. But I think by now I'm happy to have a more straightforward episode of Doctor Who to keep us going for the next few months. But that brings our discussion to a close. I think that's pretty much all we have to say about the Vanquishers and Eve of the Daleks, and that's about all we've got time for this week. I should also mention, as we are a DVD and Blu-ray podcast, that a season 17 box set is coming out very, very soon. The next, I believe it's on the 20th. It's 20th of December, I believe. I think they pushed it back a week, didn't they? So it's the 20th of December. We've got Abominable Snowmen announced for next year. I know the Flux Blu-ray is coming, and DVD is coming out in the end of January. So there's a few releases going on, and we will be back. I'm not quite sure exactly when. It might be before Christmas, might be just after the New Year's Day special. Certainly we will have a podcast to chat about Eve of the Daleks. Whether we have one between now and then, I'm not quite sure. We might be a bit busy over Christmas. But certainly we'll have lots of chat about Eve of the Daleks, but also about the season 17 box set, which has lots of exciting features I'm excited to talk about. And Ryan, some really great stories to talk about as well. I'm sure you can't wait.
I'm sure it's going to be a whole lot of fun, especially if we talk about Creature from the Pit and Hordes of Diamond. But I will say, after Doctor Who Flux, consider how much of a fluxing nightmare it was, I think I'm looking forward to watching season 17. It's going to feel like a breath of fresh air in comparison, to be honest, despite how insane and messy that season is. I'm actually quite looking forward to watching season 17 again.
Well, there
I
we
never
go.
thought myself say that.
Ryan is now a fan of season 17. Who would have thought it, eh?
Flux is bad when Flux is bad when Ryan likes season 17.
Yes, indeed.
There you go.
that just really sums it up, doesn't it? Well, that's about all we've got time for. So I will say thank you to Ryan.
Thank you very much. I hope you all enjoyed it.
And to Bill.
Thank you very much for letting me talk about the Vanquishers and series 13 and everything. And yeah, if we don't have a podcast, then I hope all our listeners have a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Indeed, yes.
You guys have the same.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And Charlie, thank you to you as well.
Thank you, everyone. It's been great talking about Flux.
Yeah, it's been really good fun, hasn't it? And as I say, we'll be back probably in the new year. So as Bill said, have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year. And we will see you guys in the new year for a brand new podcast. But until then, it's goodbye.